Chapter 1054. Number 1 room. Generally, people who were not from a family of wealthy families or didn't have a doctor grade above 6th rank which could get a discount, they would not go to Wangwei Pavilion at all. Otherwise, wouldn't they bankrupt for just staying a few days? Unexpectedly, Bai Hu didn't care when he heard it. Isn't it just 10,000 crystal stones? Let's go. Find a place to stay first. Tong Bing's little heart suddenly twitched, and he hurriedly followed up without saying anything. As soon as he arrived at the Wangwei Pavilion, Bai Hu couldn't help snapping his fingers. This Wangwei Pavilion was indeed the most expensive restaurant in Miracle Healer City. It was really luxurious. Not to mention the counter and pillars carved out of crystal stone. The manservants of the chapel outside the door were martial artists above the foundation establishment stage. And everyone who enters and exits the Wangwei Pavilion was rich or noble, and many people had the jade pendants of 6th or 7th rank doctors. There were very few ordinary martial artists here. There were occasionally a few martial artists, which turned out to be at the peak of the gold core stage. There were even 1 or 2 nascent soul stage martial artists. If Hushi came in alone, she would probably be driven out by the staff immediately. After all, a martial artist, who looked no more than the foundation establishment stage and didn't have a doctor rank, wasn't qualified to work for Wangwei Pavilion. Who would believe that she had the money to live? However, Bai Hu and Qing Luan both had the gold core stage cultivation base, and they both were chosen from the thousands of elites in King of Hell Mansion. Bai Hu had been with Nan Gongyu for a long time, so he already had the demeanor of a superior cultivator. So seeing them coming in, the shopkeeper didn't dare to neglect, and he hurriedly stepped forward to greet. Do you want to stay in our pavilion? Unfortunately, there is only the number 1 room left. Tong Bing's face twitched, and he leaned close to Hushi and said in a low voice, Senior, the number 1 is the best room in Wangwei Pavilion. The daily price is 20,000 crystal stones. Tong Bing stared at Hushi with a face full of struggle. The subtext was, if you can't afford it, let's run quickly. Hushi smiled slightly without speaking. Bai Hu had already made a decision indifferently. I want 2 number 1 rooms. We are not sure how many days are we going to stay, so these will be used as advance deposits. The shopkeeper of Wangwei Pavilion saw the storage bag that Bai Hu had thrown out and peeked into it. When he raised his head again, his face was full of respect and enthusiasm. His face was even wrinkled with a smile. Although Wangwei Pavilion had never lacked martial artists with generous payments, people like them who threw 1,000,000 crystal stones in one goal were really very rare. For residents like this, they either had a huge force or an unfathomable strength, so shopkeepers dared not to offend them. After the check-in procedure was completed, there was a runner who brought them to their rooms. In fact, it was still early at this time, so Hushi planned to go shopping in Miracle Healer City again to learn about prices and various forces here. After all, she might stay in Miracle Healer City for a long time. Therefore, they asked Tong Bing to wait here for a while, then went to the room to get familiar with the environment. However, when Hushi and the others came out, they unexpectedly didn't see Tong Bing in the lobby. Bai Hu frowned and said, Does this little guy greedy run away with our crystal stones? Qing Wan shook her head and said, Tong Bing looks quite honest. He doesn't seem like such a person. Chapter 1055. Not worth it. Hushi, Bai Hu and Qing Luan glanced at each other, and they were about to check it out, but the shopkeeper stepped forward and stopped in front of them. Meeting Hushi's gaze, the shopkeeper's gaze flickered, but he lowered his voice and said with sincere concern, Mister, you come from outside, right? Don't blame me for talking too much. I advise you not to offend someone you can't afford to offend for just a lowly person. It's not worth it. Hushi raised his eyebrows without saying anything. Then she walked out of the Wangwei Pavilion, bypassing the shopkeeper. As soon as she stepped out of the door, she heard a loud bang not far away. A small figure fell on the steps hard and groaned in pain. Both Hushi and Bai Hu showed surprised expressions. It turned out to be Tong Bing. At this time, his tattered clothes were even stained with mud. His face was bruised, and blood came out from his mouth. He looked really miserable. In front of Tong Bing, a young man in luxury clothes laughed at Tong Bing's miserable appearance. Tong Bing endured the pain, struggling to get up from the steps, but the young man stepped on his chest. Immediately afterward, he stepped on him violently, making Tong Bing's face turn pale for a while. Then he laughed wildly. I have been looking for you for so long, but I didn't expect to meet you here. Why? You want to participate in the selection assessment of the Miracle Healer Academy. Ha ha ha, you are really ignorant. Why don't you look into the mirror? Even you have the delusion of getting into the Miracle Healer Academy? Stop dreaming. As soon as the young man finished speaking, everyone behind him burst into laughter. The people coming and going on the street also stopped and looked at the excitement here. Some sympathized, some disdained, and some hurriedly walked away to avoid getting into trouble when they saw Tong Bing's miserable look. But no one would kindly stand up for Tong Bing because that young man looked like someone who shouldn't be offended easily. Tong Bing's painful body trembled slightly, but he still gritted his teeth stubbornly. Miracle Healer Academy stipulates that anyone can participate in the assessment as long as they have a recommendation letter. Of course I can too. Ha ha ha, recommendation letter? Just your useless master who died last year without a complete corpse? A second-ranked doctor's recommendation letter? Don't you feel ashamed to show it? The young man laughed again, and his voice was full of contempt and disdain. Tong Bing pushed away the feet that the young man and said angrily, You're not allowed to say that to my master. My master is not useless. My master is not dead. He just disappeared. Pooey, you dare to resist me. The young man was furious after being pushed away by Tong Bing. He condensed spiritual power on his feet and kicked Tong Bing ruthlessly. Tong Bing spat out a mouthful of blood. His pale face looked even more dreadful. The young man was at the meridian stage, and Tong Bing was just at the foundation establishment stage. Tong Bing had no resistance at all. The young man kicked him to the ground again. When he met Tong Bing's resentful eyes, he suddenly became more angry. He pointed at Tong Bing's forehead and sneered, Huh? You dare to glare at me? Who are you dare to glare at me? I will ruin your eyes right now. As he said, the flying sword pierced toward Tong Bing's eye. The onlookers turned their heads unbearably and did not dare to watch this scene. Chapter 1056, Kowtow and Apologize, Clang Dash. That was the sound of the flying sword falling to the ground. The expected pain did not come. Tong Bing opened his eyes and saw that the young man in luxury clothes had stepped away from him, staring fiercely at the surrounding crowd. Who fucking dare to disturb my business? Stand out now. Bai Hu walked down the steps of the Wangyue Pavilion step by step, holding his chest with both hands. He said with a half-smile, Your grandpa, me. The young man was startled. Bai Hu's face was very strange to him, so he didn't even know who he was. Soon a subordinate stood up and whispered a few words in the young man's ear. The young man quickly showed a clear look on his face. He said with disdain, So it's you guys. You guys are really blind to find this animal to be your guide. Forget it. I'm in a good mood today, so I can forgive you guys. Get out of here now. Bai Hu sneered. Who are you to judge which guide we can hire? You dash. You are really tired of living. The young man raised his eyebrows and stared at Bai Hu and the others fiercely. Seeing that Bai Hu's cultivation level was not low, his servant hurriedly stepped forward, raised his chin and sneered, Hee hee, are you guys new here? I think you still don't know who our young master is, right? Oh. Bai Hu picked his ear and said nonchalantly, Who is your young master? Tell me. Don't be scared to death. The servant smiled at the young man with a flattering face before looking up and said, This is our young master Hu Minghui. Our young master's father is the butler of the Miracle Healer Academy. You guys must be here to participate in the selection examination of the Miracle Healer Academy, right? I can tell you that if you offend our young master, you don't even think about participating in the selection examination of the Miracle Healer Academy. Bai Hu rolled his eyes secretly. Just a butler? With this kind of position, he can only get into the peripheral of the academy. He can't even get into the inner courtyard. They are actually so arrogant. TSK, this is really annoying. Seeing that Bai Hu hadn't spoken for a long time, the young man thought he was afraid. He smiled proudly. Why? Are you afraid now? Based on the fact that you guys don't know anything, I won't make it difficult for you. Just kowtow and apologize to me otherwise. Bai Hu seemed to come back to his senses, and he slowly said, Oh, Kowtow and apologize. The young man thought that Baihu was about to kneel to him. He said smugly, "This is just a little lesson for you so that you guys won't get close to that lowly person and don't offend the one you shouldn't." Before he finished speaking, the young man suddenly felt his knees numb. Then he made an ouch sound and knelt down. Baihu touched his chin and smiled with satisfaction. Yes, really obedient. You just kowtowed to apologize right away. Since you are so sensible, I won't trouble you anymore. You can go. There were bursts of pain in his knees. The young man was completely astounded. He only managed to get up from the ground after a long while. His entire face was distorted because of anger. His lips opened and closed tremblingly. He sternly said after a while, What are you doing in a daze? Go and beat him up." Chapter 1057. I don't care, but the highest level of cultivation among these people was only at the meridian stage. How could they be Baihu's opponent? They were all defeated in just a few moves. The servant quickly helped his bruised young master to get up. Then he shouted at Baihu, "You're done. You don't even know who you have offended. You, just wait and see." After speaking, seeing Baihu looked over with a sneer, he suddenly felt pain in his chest. How could he say more? He quickly left with his young master. Baihu was satisfied beating them up this time, but the onlookers looked at him as if they were looking at a fool. Some martial artists were full of sympathy. Wangyue Pavilion's shopkeeper even sighed and said to Hashi, "Mr. Shi, haze you guys are getting into big trouble this time. If you are here to participate in the admission selection of Miracle Healer Academy, I advise you to not participate." Hashi raised her eyebrows and said, "Why?" The shopkeeper shook his head and said, "Butler, who is the father of Hu Minghui, who happens to be responsible for registration and examination room arrangements this time. Butler, who is now in his 80s, and he finally has this son, so he pampers him very much. You hit Hu Minghui this time, he will definitely not let you go easily. If you participate in the selection, he will not only make it difficult for you, but he will also target you. You may not be able to get out of Miracle Healer City by that time. It's better to run away now." Baihu, who had just walked back, curled his lips and said nonchalantly, "Che, isn't it just a butler? I don't care." The shopkeeper shook his head and didn't say much when he saw that they didn't know what trouble they were in now. Hashi and others didn't take this matter seriously at all. According to what Qing Wan said, Miracle Healer Academy's reputation had always been fair. They would never bully candidates just because of a butler. At most, the butler would only make things difficult for Hashi using his position. Hashi wouldn't pay attention to this kind of trick at all. Tongbing also got up from the ground at this time. He walked in front of Hashi with flushed eyes and said hoarsely, "Sorry, senior, I'm the one who put you into trouble." Hashi didn't say much. She just handed him a bottle of medicinal pills and crystal stones. "This is your reward today." Tongbing was taken aback, and he shook his head again and again. "You have paid me in the morning, and I am only your tour guide for half a day. I even caused you so much trouble." Baihu frowned and said impatiently, "Just take it. Why are you talking so much? Aren't you going to participate in the selection examination of the Miracle Healer Academy? The examination is only 2 days later, so you should go back and take a rest. How do you take the examination like this?" After speaking, the few people didn't bother Tongbing and left. They were already familiar with the Miracle Healer City, so they could still walk around by themselves without a guide. Tongbing stood on the spot, holding the crystal stones and medicinal pills in his hands and staring blankly at the direction where Hashi and others left. He only murmured after a while, "Thank you. This is the first time in my life I have received goodwill from the outside world. I will certainly repay it if I have the opportunity in the future." 2 days passed in a blink of an eye, and soon it was time for the selection examination of the Miracle Healer Academy. The first day had no test. It was mainly for the formal registration of the martial artists participating in the examination. Chapter 1058. A dumb look. The entire square occupied a very large area, but now it was still full of people who came to register. Baihu couldn't help being surprised. Although I knew that the people who participated in the examination of the Miracle Healer Academy every year are young boys and girls with excellent talents, I didn't expect that there would be so many. The admission requirement of the Miracle Healer Academy was that the age must be under 30. This was because martial artists under 30 had many potentials and talents that could be tapped and shaped. In the Miluo continent, a world where most people cultivated, the average age of martial artists was more than 70 or 80 years old. It was conceivable that 30 years old was still a youthful age. However, the boys and girls who had come to apply for Miracle Healer Academy looked only 20 years old, but most of them had reached the Meridian stage. Some had even reached the Gold Core stage early stage. According to Little Egg's investigation results, among them, there were only about 4 people with dual spiritual roots, which was enough to see how talented these people were. The way to register for the entrance exam was very simple. As long as the person had a recommendation letter and his spiritual root had been verified in the small room on the left side, the registration was considered successful. Hushi bid farewell to Bai Hu and others, then she walked directly to the small room, waiting in line to receive the inscribed jade slip. The long line was full of men and women. Many people couldn't help but cast their eyes on Hushi. Among these martial artists who participated in the assessment, there were also very few at the foundation establishment stage. However, it was really rare for the foundation establishment stage martial artists to look good like Hushi. Although most people still cast contemptuous glances at her, there were also many young girls being moved by her outstanding face. Look, that young man looks really handsome. Even the most beautiful man, Mr. Jiang, in our Linyue city can't be compared with him. What's the use of handsome? He is just at the foundation establishment stage. He actually dares to come to receive the inscribed jade slip. Does he really think he can win? He is probably inexperienced who wants to open his eyes. Open his eyes? Is he stupid? Miracle Healer Academy's assessment is very dangerous. Isn't he afraid of dying here? Hushi naturally heard these people's comments, but she had long been used to it, so she would take these words to her heart. Suddenly, she felt a scrutinizing gaze on her body, which made her slightly stunned. When she looked back, she saw a young man was looking at her from a distance of 3 people. The man seemed to be in his early 20s, but he had a baby face and 2 deep dimples when he laughed. The pair of eyes seemed to be half open, which exuded a mysterious and unfathomable vibe. What surprised Hushi was that this man's cultivation level had actually reached the Gold Core stage intermediate stage. Among all the martial artists who came to the assessment, he was considered to be the top. Seeing Hushi looking over, the man couldn't help but smile at her. In a moment, the original mysterious vibe disappeared. He showed a dumb look. Hushi twitched her mouth and turned her head. Chapter 1059. Bend the law for personal gain. Hushi frowned and got rid of his palm without doing any obvious move. The man looked at his empty palm with surprise, then his eyes flashed as if he didn't sense Hushi's rejection at all. He smiled and said, "Our meeting is a fate. Don't be so aloof. I'm Wei Qingyuan. May I know your name, brother?" Hushi said indifferently, "Compared believing that our meeting is a fate, I rather believe that only someone with ill intention will show kindness for no reason." After speaking, before waiting for Wei Qingyuan to react, she turned around and ignored him. Wei Qingyuan was first startled after hitting a wall, but he wasn't annoyed as he just smiled. TSK, interesting. The more this little guy doesn't care about me, the more I want to provoke him. The queue was moving forward bit by bit. It was mainly to verify the identity information and recommendation letters of the applicants, so it took a little time. Suddenly, an angry voice came from the front of the queue. I also have a letter of recommendation. Why don't you let me sign up?" This sound was familiar. Hushi looked up and saw Tongbing's figure as expected. He was arguing with the people at the registration post, but he was ruthlessly kicked to the ground. The people who originally lined up behind Tongbing burst into commotion and scattered like scared birds. Because the crowd dispersed, Hushi, who was already close to the registration post, naturally stood in the front row. She just happened to see Tongbing's bruised nose and swollen face with tears. Hushi put her arms around her chest. Then she saw a middle-aged man walking out of the registration post, exuding strong spirit pressure. His cultivation base had at least the early stage of the Gold Core stage, and he looked familiar. Behind this middle-aged man, There was also an arrogant teenager who Hushi recognized at a glance. It was Hu Minghui who bullied Tong Bing at the entrance of Wangwei Pavilion that day. The bruise on Hu Minghui's face still didn't recover. At this time, his face was full of pride and arrogance, and with a vicious resentment. He looked at Tong Bing condescendingly and said, "I said earlier, you're not eligible to apply for the Miracle Healer Academy at all. If you are smart, go back now." Butler, who glared at his son and said to Tong Bing with a majestic expression, "We have already said that you are not eligible to apply for Miracle Healer Academy, but you still want to cause trouble. We can only teach you a lesson." Tong Bing gritted his teeth and said, "Why am I not eligible to apply for Miracle Healer Academy? You don't have a recommendation letter." Hu Minghui sneered. "Miracle Healer Academy has regulations that you must have a doctor's recommendation letter before you can apply. So, how can you register?" "You bullshit. I obviously gave the recommendation letter. You must have used your power to avenge your personal grievance and destroyed my recommendation letter. Miracle Healer Academy's assessment is obviously the most fair and strict. How can you behave like this?" Tong Bing's remarks were extremely serious, attracting the eyes of all the candidates. They all pointed at Hu Minghui and his father. Butler, who said with a solemn face, "Miracle Healer Academy has regulations that people who make trouble can be dealt with any means. Even if a person is killed, it is not our responsibility. I wanted to let you go just because you are young and ignorant, but you actually step on my face. Don't blame me for being rude." Chapter 1060. Seek Justice and Ash. The crowd didn't expect Butler who to attack suddenly. The thunderball was about to envelop Tong Bing. He had no way to resist with his cultivation, but suddenly, an ice wall appeared in front of Tong Bing, completely blocking the thunderball. After the crackling sound, the ice wall shattered, but the thunderball disappeared without a trace. Hu Minghui was still delighted to see the person who displeased him was about to be killed by his father, but someone disrupted it. He said furiously, Who dares to obstruct the Academy's affairs? Do you still want to participate in the assessment?" In the crowd, a beautiful young man walked out slowly. His eyebrows were picturesque, his skin was like snow, and the slender figure looked like a work of art carved from ice jade in the sun. It was enchanting by just taking a look. The young man's cultivation was obviously only at the foundation establishment stage, but under the gaze of Hu Minghui and Butler Hu, he seemed to be completely fearless. He said faintly, "When does seeking justice for himself become causing troubles? You even dare to threaten the candidates not being able to participate in the assessment? Is Miracle Healer Academy run by your Hu family?" As soon as this remark came out, everyone present cast contemptuous glances at Hu Minghui and his father. After all, Hu Minghui and Butler Hu were just two servants of the outer courtyard of Miracle Healer Academy. The people who signed up for the assessment on the spot were the talented children of various families. They were all pampered in their families. When did their future be in the hands of only two servants? Wasn't this funny? Butler, whose face changed slightly, and he glared at his nonsense son. Then he calmed down and said, Mister, you can't simply talk nonsense. I just act according to the rules of the Academy. How can it be considered a threat? This student does not have a letter of recommendation. How can we break the rule for him?" Before Hushi had time to speak, Hu Minghui suddenly said angrily, "I know you. You and the others helped the bastard back at the Wangwei Pavilion." With that, he said hatefully toward Butler Hu, "Father, they beat me seriously a few days ago. You must seek justice for me." Butler Hu's face was cold when he heard the words. He really wanted to split his brain to see if his brain was made of tofu. If Hu Minghui didn't mention, he could still use his power to say that there was a problem with his recommendation letter. Now that he shouted out loud in the public, if he still dared to play trick, wouldn't it prove his crime of using his authority on personal grievances? Butler, who took a deep breath, smiled at Hushi and said without a smile, "Mister, you are just at the foundation establishment stage, but your temper is really something." However, Mr. may not be aware of Miracle Healer Academy's assessment. Although there is no threshold for the level of cultivation, people with poor strength entering the final assessment field will not just suffer some minor external injuries. You and student Tongbing student should come again next time. Hushi raised her eyebrows and sneered, Butler who, as the butler of Miracle Healer Academy's outer courtyard, you really have huge power. Why? Does Miracle Healer Academy have regulations saying that the foundation establishment stage cannot register? Chapter 1061. Recommendation letter. Then he sneered and said, Since you insist, do as you please. But in any case, this Tongbing does not have a letter of recommendation. He definitely can't participate in this assessment. You nonsense. I obviously have a recommendation letter. Tongbing looked at Hushi with tears, and he said in a trembling voice, Mister, I really have a recommendation letter. I handed it to Butler who. They are clearing slandering me. Hushi frowned. Before she could speak, a smile came from the man beside her. Recommendation letter is just a formality. It is easy to get. Don't cry, young man. Brother can give you one. As soon as the man said this, all eyes immediately fell on him. By hearing the teasing tone, Hushi knew that it was Wei Qingyuan who just talked to her. Seeing Hushi looking over, Wei Qingyuan blinked at her like he was her acquaintance, making Hushi twitch his mouth. Wei Qingyuan took 2 steps forward and threw out a piece of paper. Here, this is the recommendation letter. Just fill in your name on it by yourself. Let Butler who verify this letter. This time, he can't really say that you don't have a recommendation letter, right? Tongbing took the recommendation letter in a daze. He glanced at it, then his eyes suddenly widened in horror. He kept looking up at Wei Qingyuan, then looked down at the recommendation letter in his hand. His body trembled slightly. Butler who looked at Wei Qingyuan with surprise and uncertainty on his face. This man looked very strange, but his manner showed like he was someone important. More importantly, Butler who couldn't see through this person's cultivation level. Tongbing tremblingly wrote his name on the recommendation letter. Then he handed it to Butler who. Minghui's angry eyes burst into flames, and he wished he could tear Tongbing apart now. Seeing him handing over the recommendation letter, he immediately rushed over and grabbed it in his hand. He sneered, You really think the doctor's recommendation letter is so easy to get? I want to see if it's authentic. Suddenly, his voice stopped abruptly. His eyes almost popped out. Seeing that his son's expression, Butler who hurriedly took the recommendation letter in shock. 9th rank doctor. This is the recommendation letter of the 9th rank doctor. Master Emotion? How is this possible? Wei Qingyuan put his arms around his chest and chuckled softly. What? Miracle Healer Academy has regulations that we can't take the recommendation letter of the 9th rank doctor to participate in the entrance examination? No dash. No. No. Butler who shook his head quickly and nodded toward Wei Qingyuan. I didn't expect you to be a disciple of Master Emo. Sorry for being disrespectful. Wei Qingyuan smiled and looked at Butler who quietly. Butler who didn't dare to say more. He hurried back to take the inscribed jade slip and handed it to Tongbing, Hushi, and Wei Qingyuan. The farce was over completely, but everyone looked at Wei Qingyuan with suspicion. This time, there was no shortage of disciples and children of the major families and sect, but no one recognized this Wei Qingyuan. Chapter 1062. Ignore. After receiving help, Butler who glared at him with regret. Then he sneered, Why are you in a hurry? Let's not talk about whether they can participate in the first test with their spiritual root qualifications. Even if they pass this test, with just the cultivation of the foundation establishment stage, aren't they just looking for death? Minghui was taken aback, then he was a little excited. Father, do you mean to do tricks in the assessment? Is that necessary? The assessment is originally a competition between the weak and the strong. Even if we don't do anything, they will just be bullied by others. Isn't that better? When Minghui heard the words, the gloom on his face disappeared. He said excitedly, Father is really smart. Now I'm still afraid that Tongbing will not be able to participate in the assessment. When he enters the assessment, without the help of those gold core stage friends, let's see what can he do. Hushi was playing with the inscribed jade slip at hand. This inscribed jade slip was now just a blank inscribed jade slip with the ranking order, but as the assessment progresses, All the information will be recorded in it. After passing the spiritual root inspection, the student's information would be recorded in the inscribed jade slip. After recording, the information in it could no longer be changed. In the end, 60% of the student's scores were judged based on the information recorded in this inscribed jade slip. Hushi was planning to perform spiritual root verification. Then Wei Qingyuan and Tong Bing followed suit. Wei Qingyuan wanted to put his arm around Hushi's shoulder like a buddy. Then he said, "Hey, little brother, why do you ignore me after receiving my help? I just helped your friend. Can't you say a thank you?" It's fine if you don't thank me, but at least tell me your name." Hushi squinted and glared at Wei Qingyuan's hand. Wei Qingyuan's action became stiff. He coughed twice and obediently retracted his hand. Tong Bing, who was following Wei Qingyuan, blushed and whispered, No, I'm not Senior's friend, no. I'm not worthy to be a Senior's friend. I was just hired by Senior as his guide 2 days ago. When Hu Minghui attacked me, it was Senior who saved me." Seeing that he was about to cry, Hushi's eyes trembled. She couldn't help shaking her head before taking out a bottle of medicinal pills and giving it to him. "How are your injuries?" This 17-year-old boy looked so immature, making her think of Shao Qi, so she naturally showed him a little more care. Tong Bing was grateful. He took the medicinal pills with a shaking hand, and he kept saying thank you. Only when he poured out medicinal pills to swallow, Wei Qingyuan suddenly reached out, snatched the bottle from his hand, put it on the tip of his nose, and smelled it. The next moment, he yelled, "Damn, the best meridian cleansing pill. You just a bottle to him? Brother, how can you be so generous? I can only buy 3 after queuing up at the Qingxia sect shop for half a month." Tong Bing's face was flushed. He didn't know whether he should swallow the medicinal pills. Chapter 1063. Passed the inspection before Hushi received it. Wei Qingyuan had already kept the medicine bottle away shamelessly and said with a smile, "Since you guys don't want this best quality pills, then give them to me. I'm welcome to take them." Hushi glared at him and didn't bother him. At this moment, it was Hushi's turn to inspect the spiritual root, so she hurriedly walked into the hut. Testing the spiritual root was only the first step in the assessment of Miracle Healer Academy. It was just a widespread screening process. Hushi originally thought that Miracle Healer Academy would not take it seriously, but when she walked into the cabin and saw an old man with a gray beard sitting on the side, she couldn't help but be surprised. This old man turned out to be at the nascent soul stage, and it was even the intermediate stage. The aura around him was neat, and his clothes were normal. If Hushi didn't have little egg, she wouldn't be able to see the old man's true cultivation. When the old man saw Hushi, he looked at her from her toes to her head. Then he pointed to the side and said, "Go in for the test." The old man pointed to a very small array, which could only accommodate 3 to 5 people standing. The rune of this formation was very peculiar. Even though Hushi had some understanding of arrays, she still couldn't understand it at all. What surprised Hushi was that the energy crystal stone placed in every corner of the formation was the extremely rare 6th-grade crystal stones. Is this Miracle Healer Academy too rich? Or is this spiritual root verification very important to Miracle Healer Academy? Logically, Miracle Healer Academy is different from the normal clans and big families. There are various martial artists who cultivate different techniques, so the spiritual root qualification shouldn't be the most important for them. Why is it necessary to do such a test? Could it be that this array could identify some secrets that martial artists can't see through? At this moment, Hushi finally felt a sense of tension in her heart. She had too many secrets in her body, like the Sumaru void ring and little egg. Various thoughts flashed in her mind, but Hushi's face did not show any emotion. She quickly entered the array. Under the cover of little egg, the 2 spiritual powers of water and fire in her body were running. Soon, pure blue and red light appeared on the array. The old man glanced at her in surprise, and his eyes turned a little solemn. He said solemnly, "The dual spiritual roots of fire and water. You have passed the verification." Hushi breathed a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the old man sigh in a low voice, "Such a good qualification. You are just too eager for quick success and short gains." If you come here in a few years, you will at least have some self-protection in the assessment. Hashi paused slightly, then she walked out of the hut with a smile. Wei Qingyuan and Tong Bing tested their spiritual roots after Hashi. All three of them finished the test and waited for the results of the assessment. Wei Qingyuan held a weed in his mouth and asked Hashi with a grin, "Hey brother, how is your result? Let me tell you, I have the dual mutated sky spiritual root of wind and thunder. You don't have to be worried because you have me protecting you in the academy." Tong Bing covered his mouth and exclaimed. He looked at Wei Qingyuan with admiration. "Brother Wei, you are so amazing. You actually have dual sky spiritual root. This is really 1 in a million." Chapter 1064. Really interesting. Hashi was so annoyed by this guy until she heard the discussion from a few martial artists not far away. "Hey, haven't you heard that the girl who just entered, her spiritual root test result is the dual sky spiritual root of gold and earth? This is the sky spiritual root of pure 5 elements. It hasn't appeared in the assessment of Miracle Healer Academy for many years." "I know that girl. She is the eldest lady of Shueyu sect. I heard that she is only 19 years old this year, but she has already broken through the gold core stage. Her talent is even close to Feng Lianying. I remember Feng Lianying also has the dual sky spiritual root of water and fire, right?" "Pui, Feng Lianying, that shameless woman, did such a shameful thing. The entire Miluo continent has known about it. How can she be compared with the miss of the Shueyu sect?" "That's right, such a disgusting woman. She is lucky for not being expelled from academy. What's more, I heard that her so-called sky spiritual root of the 5 elements is actually changed forcibly by her master's medicine. It can't be compared with the real dual sky spiritual root of the 5 elements. Hee, see that woman wearing Feng family costumes over there? It is Feng Yunqing. I heard that Feng family sent her to the Miracle Healer Academy to replace Feng Lianying. Otherwise, if the Feng family doesn't have a place in the Miracle Healer Academy, the family will just suffer in Miluo continent." "Really?" Someone couldn't help but exclaimed. "Miracle Healer Academy is just an academy after all. Do these major families still have to give face to the academy? You don't even know this? Miracle Healer City and Miracle Healer Academy have the most scared status in Miluo continent. Let alone these family sects. Even the Doctors Association dare not say that they have a say in Miracle Healer Academy." The strength of Miracle Healer Academy made those who signed up even more excited. As long as they could pass the assessment and enter the academy, their classmates all had huge family backgrounds and strength. They couldn't help but yearn for it. When Wei Qingyuan saw Hashi listening to other people's discussions in a daze, he couldn't help but approach her with a smile. "As far as I know, there isn't a single martial artist of the Foundation establishment stage being admitted to the Miracle Healer Academy in hundreds of years. Although I hope to see you two in the academy, the chances of you two passing the assessment are unlikely to be great." Tong Bing immediately said dejectedly. He said in a low voice, "My spiritual root test result is the dual spiritual root of wind and water, and my spiritual root is also a little impure. Maybe I can't even pass the first assessment. It would be nice if I have the talent like you, Brother Wei." Wei Qingyuan smiled and did not speak, but his deep gaze stared at Hashi imperceptibly. Hashi hadn't spoken yet. Then there was a clamor in the distance. "The results of the first round of screening have been announced." As soon as this word came out, everyone swarmed in the direction where the sound came from. Just after Hashi took one step, she stopped, turned around and said faintly, "There hasn't been one in hundreds of years, but soon you will see one." Wei Qingyuan was taken aback. When he realized what Hashi's words meant, he burst into laughter. His eyes were full of interest. "Interesting. Really interesting. I want to see why he is so confident." Chapter 1065. Cheating. Before the three of them walked into the bulletin board, they heard a wailing sound from the crowd. How come so many people signed up, and in the end less than 100 people were admitted? This is only the first round. Isn't it too harsh? I I'm a single mutated spiritual root of Earth. How could I be screened out? Che, the first round of screening does not only look at spiritual root qualifications, but also your muscles, bones, cultivation, and potential. No matter how good your qualifications are, if your cultivation base is not enough and your potential is too bad, of course you will be screened out. I heard that last year's assessment, only 8 people were admitted at the end. There were nearly 1,000 people who applied for the assessment at that time. How many of these 96 people will be able to stay in the end? When the trio squeezed into the crowd and glanced, not surprisingly, Hushi saw her name. Shiyu at the end of the list. Wei Qingyuan's name was 6th from the top. As soon as he saw it, he bit the weed and smiled. I actually only ranked 6th in the spiritual root qualification test. PKSK, who was in front of me? Suddenly, someone exclaimed, "How come there are people of the foundation establishment stage on the list?" That's right. Didn't it mean that it's not just about the assessment of spiritual root? If you count the cultivation base, how can the people of the foundation establishment stage be on the list? I remember that there hasn't been a foundation establishment stage martial artist in the first round of screening for decades, right? Is this person a relative of the Academy Master? Is he cheating? The crowd suddenly burst commotion. Especially many people who failed were filled with outrage. They wanted an explanation from the Academy. Because there was too much noise, a boy in green clothes slowly walked out of the hut, glanced around with a fierce gaze and said coldly, "Shiyu, dual sky spiritual root of water and fire." His bone and meridians are 17 years old. The peak of the foundation establishment stage. Her selection is beyond doubt. If you have any objections, I don't mind reporting it to the upper level of the academy. The boy in green clothes paused and continued, "Since you are so dissatisfied with the academy's verdict, then you should not participate in the academy's assessment anymore." As soon as this remark came out, the audience fell into a weird silence. No one dared to say more. Seeing that there was no objection, the boy in green clothes said indifferently, "All the candidates who fail the screening, please return your inscribed jade slip into the spiritual root inspection hut. We will register your information. If you want to participate again in the assessment next year, you don't need to provide a recommendation letter." After speaking, the boy in green clothes just walked into the hut. After the crowd was silent for a while, someone suddenly murmured to break the calm, "Shiyu? Shiyu? Why is this name so familiar? Could it be the young master of the Shengda Hall?" Shengda Hall? Is the Shengda Hall that sells the best quality pills? If it is him, then it's no wonder he can be so powerful. I heard that some of the best quality pills sold by Shengda Hall can increase one's cultivation in a short period of time and even improve their aptitude. He must have taken those medicinal pills. That's why he is so powerful, right? So what if he took the medicinal pills? With the foundation establishment stage, he will definitely die miserably when he enters the second or third rounds of assessment. At this time, Wei Qingyuan's surprised gaze fell on Hushi. He said after a long while, "So you are Shiyu?" Chapter 1066. Already left. Wei Qingyuan was stunned for a moment. Then his baby face collapsed as he said depressingly, "Well, I even boast of my mutated dual sky spiritual root in front of you. I didn't expect that you actually have a dual 5-element sky spiritual root. You're really too bad. When I was bragging just now, you must be laughing behind my back." Hushi was amused by this guy. As she was about to speak, she saw Tong Bing's tearful appearance, and she suddenly reacted. Only one foundation establishment stage passed the screening, which naturally meant that Tong Bing had failed. Realizing that Hushi was watching him, Tong Bing smiled reluctantly and said, "Mr. Shi, you are so amazing. I didn't expect you to be a dual sky spiritual root. No wonder you can pass the screening. I actually know that I can't pass the assessment, but I just want to try it." But, sure enough, it is impossible for someone like me to enter Miracle Healer Academy. What Hushi was not good at comforting people. She just said indifferently, "Your spiritual power fluctuations are full of peaceful vitality, so you are a very suitable person to become a doctor. You failed this year, but you can wait next year or the year after." As long as you break through to the meridian stage, your chances of passing the assessment will increase a lot. There is no need to rush for quick success. Tong Bing's eyes were red, and he nodded quickly. He said softly, Then I will return the inscribed jade slip first. Sorry, Brother Wei. I wasted your recommendation letter. Wei Qingyuan interrupted him nonchalantly. It's just a piece of torn paper. It's nothing. What's more, now that you registered once, you can participate directly in the future, which is not a waste. Shiyu, are I right? Tong Bing bit his lip, bowed to Hushi and Wei Qingyuan again, said thank you in a low voice, then he turned and ran toward the hut. The end of the spiritual root test meant that the first day of assessment was also over. Hushi originally planned to wait for Tong Bing to leave the examination room together. After all, Hu Minghui and his son were still nearby. The mysterious Wei Qingyuan, whose intention was unclear, stayed with Hushi. However, half an hour passed. The martial artists who returned the inscribed jade slips all came out one after another and left, but Tong Bing never showed up. Even in the end, the people on the square were almost gone, and the academy was preparing to cover the square with enchantment again, but Hushi never saw Tong Bing. The boy in green clothes came out from the hut. Seeing that Hushi and Wei Qingyuan had not left, he came over in surprise. The first day of assessment is over. You can leave. Hushi frowned, but she still asked about Tong Bing's whereabouts. The boy in green clothes said, It turns out that you were the friends of that little guy. A teacher in the college asked him to help with some chores. He has already left after he finished them. He actually asked a manservant to notify you, but I guess that manservant has forgotten it. With that, the boy in green clothes frowned and complained. These people are really getting less and less focused. Sorry for letting you wait for so long. Hushi shook her head, smiled faintly, and bowed to the boy in green clothes before leaving. Wei Qingyuan raised his eyebrows, glanced at the boy in green clothes meaningfully, and left as well. He kept up with Hushi's pace and yelled, Shiyu, don't go so fast. Where do you live? How about I move to stay in the same inn as you for these few days? Chapter 1067. Not human in the hut. The old man in charge of testing the spiritual root raised his head, and his sleepy eyes flickered at this moment. How? Did those people have any doubt? The boy in green clothes thought for a moment before he said, Shouldn't be. I can see that they are just getting acquainted with that Tong Bing, and they don't have a deep friendship. They are just asking out of friendship. As for that Wei Qingyuan, I don't know who is this person, but I always feel that he is not simple. The old man shook his head and said, Don't worry about him, as long as they don't doubt it. You can take those people in the hut back first. As he said, he smiled, showing the deep wrinkles on his face. This year's harvest seems to be pretty good. This is already the third one. Now, the above should be satisfied. Hushi, who walked out of the square, suddenly turned his head, looking deep into the direction of the square. There was gradually being enveloped by a barrier, and the air was like a layer of mist, making people no longer able to see the scene inside. Bai Hu, Qing Wan, and Gu Lufeng, who were waiting outside, all ran over at this time, and they asked about Hushi's assessment results. After asking for a long time and seeing Hushi didn't speak, Bai Hu couldn't help but nervously say, Young master, what's the matter? Didn't you pass the first round of assessment? Ahem, that's fine. Let's think of another way. Wei Qingyuan on the side was looking up at the martial artists of the 3 gold core stages. It was clear that Shiyu's cultivation base was so much lower than them, but they were so submissive to her. TSK, Shiyu really isn't simple. Hearing Bai Hu's words, Wei Qingyuan couldn't help but sigh. Don't worry about it. Shiyu is the only foundation establishment stage martial artist who passed the first round of assessment. Bai Hu breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the words. Yeah. Make impossible possible. This is the style of princess. However, Bai Hu turned his eyes on Wei Qingyuan with hostility. Who are you? Who is this? Why is he so close to princess? Wei Qingyuan laughed, did not answer Bai Hu's words, but looked at Hushi, Shiyu? Then we will see you in the second assessment? Hope there is a chance to become your classmate. After speaking, Wei Qingyuan left without waiting for Bai Hu to speak. Bai Hu let out a tisk. Looking at his handsome back, he couldn't help but roast. Flower peacock. Gu Lufeng asked Hashi in a low voice. Shiyu, what's wrong? Nothing. Hashi shook her head. Then she said something that didn't make sense. Tong Bing was not selected. After that, she stopped looking in the direction of the square before walking toward the Wangyue Pavilion. Gu Lufeng, who was left behind, frowned slightly. What did Shiyu mean? Bai Hu regretfully shook his head and said, Tong Bing really did not pass the screening, but this is normal. He is only at the foundation establishment stage. If things happen, he will be killed in the assessment. It would be better to train for a few years before trying. Gu Lufeng smiled and said, What is foundation establishment stage? Don't forget, our Shiyu is also the foundation establishment stage. Bai Hu suddenly said exaggeratedly, Can she be compared? Our princess is not a human being. She is the devil herself. Comparing her to ordinary people, isn't it a joke? Gu Lufeng was choked by Bai Hu's words. Then he looked at Hashi and couldn't help but sigh. Is Shiyu really only at the foundation establishment stage? Chapter 1068. Student Council. But at this time, a building to the south was still brightly lit, and occasionally indistinct figures were walking around. This was the area where the Miracle Healer Academy's Student Council was located. The Academy was an organization completely managed by the students of Miracle Healer Academy. It had great power in the Miracle Healer Academy, and it was also a bridge for the reconciliation of contradictions and connections between the Academy and the students. This time, the Miracle Healer Academy entrance assessment, except for the teachers who were specifically responsible for the assessment and supervision, other related matters were all taken care of by the Student Council. On the top floor of the building where the Student Council was located, there was a private room that belonged to the president, vice presidents, and the key members of the Student Council. The decoration inside was elegant and luxurious. At this time, the sky was dim, but the crystal stone shone in the room, which reflected the antique style of the painted wall. At this time, two women were sitting in this elegant room. If Hashi were here, she would be able to recognize these two acquaintances, Lu Jishi and Ren Shuling, who had become enemies with her in Yangon City. At this time, Ren Shuling was burning a recording talisman, watching the handsome figure of a young man in the talisman with flushing cheeks. However, Lu Jishi was staring at a medicinal pill as if there was a depression and sorrow that couldn't be solved. Suddenly, the door gently pushed open, and a tall young man strode in. This man seemed to be only 18 years old. He had handsome facial features, a pair of sword eyebrows, and deep and shining eyes. It could be seen that he was a determined teenager. As soon as Ren Shuling saw the man entering, she immediately put away the recording talisman she was watching. But her eyes were shy of joy. Brother Caillou, why are you here? Caillou was the vice president of the student council and the top in the entrance assessment 5 years ago. He became the vice president in these 5 years. Caillou gently touched Ren Shuling's head, looking at her as if he was looking at a naughty little sister. What does Shuling mean? Can I come? Ren Shuling blushed and lowered her head shyly, saying like a mosquito, No, I'm happy that you are here. However, Caillou did not hear her. Instead, she walked to Lu Jishi's side a few steps, and his voice was unconsciously low and soft. Jishi, this is the list of participants who participated in the Miracle Healer Academy assessment this time and their corresponding examiners. If there are no problems, I will submit the list to the elders. The formal assessment will be carried out the day after tomorrow. All students participating in the assessment of Miracle Healer Academy would be assigned with an examiner during the evaluation period. These examiners were sometimes teachers of the academy and sometimes key members of the student council. This year, it happened to be the student councils to supervise the assessment. Therefore, How much power did the student council have that allowed them to supervise the assessment? Lu Zixi recovered, put the medicinal pill into the storage device, smiled, and took the list from Caillou. Caillou stood aside, staring blankly at the beautiful face of the young girl. His handsome face flushed slightly. Chapter 1069. Is there any problem? Caillou's heart was pounding. His eyes were full of infatuation and inferiority complex. Before entering Miracle Healer Academy, Caillou always felt that he had an awe-inspiring innate talent, and he was superior. However, since he met Lu Zixi, he had never had the pride he once had. Their president was really good, so good that he felt ashamed. He couldn't wait to give the best in the world to her. Lu Zixi didn't notice Caillou's thoughts. She just carefully looked at the information of everyone on the list. Miss Han Qianer of Shuiyu sect, Feng Yunqin of Feng family, Xia Qian of Qixing Palace. These were all famous among the students who applied for this year's assessment, but Lu Zixi wasn't moved at all. Caillou didn't pay attention to these boys and girls at all. In Caillou's mind, these geniuses praised by outsiders could not be compared with his president. However, Lu Zixi, whose expression had been calm, suddenly looked shocked when seeing the last name on the list. She couldn't help exclaiming, "Shiyu? Why is he here?" Caillou suddenly woke up from the confusion of peeping at Lu Zixi, and he stepped forward and said, "What's wrong? Is there anything wrong?" He was about to take the inscribed jade slip in Lu Zixi hand and take a look, but Ren Shuling moved faster than him. When her divine sense probed into the inscribed jade slip and saw the name and introduction of Shiyu, as well as the introduction of the water and fire dual sky spiritual root, she suddenly said furiously, "This bitch dares to come here? She even dares to take the assessment?" Seeing Lu Zixi's unsightly expression, Caillou quickly asked, "Zixi, what's wrong? Is there anything wrong with this Shiyu?" Lu Zixi bit her lower lip and shook her head eagerly. "No, just happened to know him. How could this be fine?" Before Lu Zixi finished speaking, she was interrupted by Ren Shuling, who was anxious on the side. "Brother Caillou, I tell you, this bitch named Shiyu is simply too much. In Yangon City, she not only provoked and bullied senior sister, used her name to hype up her own reputation, and she even used despicable means to grab the credit of senior sister. She made everyone in Yangon City laugh at me and senior sister. When I think of this bitch, I'm still so angry that I can't fall asleep." When Caillou heard Ren Shuling's words, his face suddenly turned gloomy, and the aura of the peak of gold core stage on his body naturally spread out. "What is going on? Can you tell me clearly? Someone dared to bully Zixi and rob her of her credit? He is simply tired of living." Ren Shuling immediately talked about what happened in Yangon City with some additional untrue facts. The more she said, the more Caillou's face became gloomy. The coldness in his eyes even made Ren Shuling feel scared. However, even though Ren Shuling was a little afraid of the strange brother Caillou, she had more resentment toward Shiyu. She kept cursing her non-stop. "That's it. The bitch Shiyu used despicable means to disturb the mind of senior sister, and she even stole senior sister's treatment plan. In the end, she even snatched senior sister's credit and the divine soul jade. It's a pity that senior sister and I just wanted to help with goodwill, but Shiyu made us be hated by the people of the Yangon City." Chapter 1070. What's wrong? Caillou's fists on both sides of his body were clenched tight. He said with a chilling tone, "How is it just hateful? He simply deserves death." Lu Zixi shook her head and said in disapproval, "Shuling, don't talk nonsense. Mr. Shi just did what he thought was right. At least on the surface, we couldn't pick out any mistakes in his behavior." As she said, she set her eyes on Caillou and whispered lonely, "Caillou, Don't listen to Shuoling's nonsense. It's all a misunderstanding. Maybe I'm really inferior to others. Okay, there is no problem on this list. Do you need me to report to the elders now? Ren Shuoling saw that Lu Zixi had spoken up for Shiyu in this way. She protested furiously. Sister, are you stupid? How can you just let him go? You kindly let him go, but did he let you go in Yangon City? What's more, if he passes the examination, who knows how will he slander you in this academy? Besides, did you forget? The bitch Shiyu is obviously shameless, and he even made a blacklist for Shengda Hall, so that those people turn against our doctors' association. How can we let such a cruel person step into the Miracle Healer Academy? I'll go to Elder Wang and ask him to kick this Shiyu out of the assessment list. A person like him wants to get into the Miracle Healer Academy? Simply dreaming. Shuoling, come back. Lu Zixi said solemnly. This list has already been announced on the square. If you ask someone to remove Shiyu's name on the list, what would the other martial artists who participated in the assessment think? Our student council is the most fair and strict organization in the academy. How can we use our power for private revenge? Okay, this matter ends here. With that, she stood up and took the list in Ren Shuoling's hand. However, Caillou moved faster than her, grabbing the inscribed jade slip, and smiled gently. Zixi, I suddenly remembered that there are some things wrong with this list. Let me amend it before letting you review. Lu Zixi eyes flashed, and her voice was gentle and soft. What's wrong? Caillou's voice couldn't help but soften a bit, as if he was afraid of polluting her. No, I just think I haven't participated in the invigilation for a long time, so I will replace Zhang Chong with me this time. Ren Shuoling immediately clapped his hands and laughed. Brother Caillou is really smart. Yes, instead of removing his name, it is better to let that bitch suffer in the assessment. Humph. Anyway, the casualty rate is high in every year assessment. He only has the foundation establishment stage. He will definitely suffer by then. Ha ha ha. Lu Zixi was in hesitation. Her face was full of disapproval and intolerance. Caillou quickly interrupted her and laughed. Zixi, don't worry about it. I will take care of this. There are some dirty people and things that are not understandable by a kind-hearted person like Zixi, but you can rest assured, I will never let them hurt you again. After speaking, he patted the excited Ren Shuoling's head and walked out of the private room. Ren Shuoling was so excited. She couldn't wait to know the end of Shiyu. With that thought in mind, she also followed out. Chapter 1071. Should I count interest? When only Lu Zixi was left in the elegant room, she sneered slightly, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. But the change in expression was only a moment, and soon her face was covered with a slight sadness and loneliness. After Caillou left the private room, he was about to close the door. When he turned around and saw Lu Zixi's sad and lonely expression through the door, he suddenly felt sorry for her. Our president has always been a godlike existence. In the entire Miracle Healer Academy, no one dares to disrespect and no one doesn't admire her. Unexpectedly, she was bullied by a guy from the foundation establishment stage. No wonder Lu Zixi has been depressed since she came back last time. The gentle and noble smile that had always been on her face has disappeared. It turned out that she was wronged like that outside. When Caillou thought of this, he couldn't help clenching his fists. I'm really useless. Never mind if I'm not as outstanding as our president, knowing that our president is so kind and gentle, but I can't even protect her from being harmed. What is the meaning of me being the vice president? Humph. You? Since you dare to bully our president, no matter who you are, I will teach you a bloody lesson. The third day was the real first round of the Miracle Healer Academy entrance assessment. Hushi arrived at the assessment square early, but even though she came here early, she found that almost 100 martial artists who passed the spiritual root test were waiting here early. As soon as Wei Qingyuan saw Hushi, he leaned in very naturally and put his arm around her shoulder. Xiao Yuer, how do you feel? The formal assessment will begin today. You won't be nervous and didn't sleep last night, right? Hushi stretched out her hand and flicked away his arm lightly. She didn't seem to do anything, but Wei Qingyuan felt his arm numb. He screamed and backed a few steps. Wei Qingyuan said with a bitter face, "Brother, we have faced difficulties together the day before yesterday. You don't have to be cruel to brother, right?" Hushi sneered and said, "I don't know if we have faced difficulties together, but I remember clearly that you stole elixir from me. Thank you. 9 superb meridian cleansing pills, 900,000 crystals." Wei Qingyuan's face was stiff. His arm that was about to put around Hushi's shoulder was kept back after hearing Hushi's cold words. "You have owed me 900,000 crystals for 2 days. Should I count interest as well?" Wei Qingyuan completely wilted. He ran far away from her with a sullen expression. The resentment he felt was evident, but he didn't dare to get close to Hushi again, for fear that this beautiful young boy would settle accounts with him again. He obviously runs Shengda Hall. All the best quality pills belong to him. Can't you just give a few to me? Do you need to be so stingy? Wei Qingyuan neglected selectively at this time. He had tens of thousands of crystal stones in his family. 900,000 crystals were less than a fraction, but he was stingy that he didn't want to pay the money. Soon, the first round of assessment was about to begin. Before that, a thin elder walked to the square and said some meaningless nonsense. The content was nothing more than promoting the academy mission of the Miracle Healer Academy and emphasizing fairness and justice in assessments. What shocked Hushi was that this elder, who seemed to be smiling but lazy, turned out to be a master of the nascent soul later stage. Chapter 1072. Disbelief. Any elder of the Miracle Healer Academy is at the nascent soul stage level. It really deserves to be the most mysterious and most sought-after place in the Miluo continent. After the elder's nonsense was finished, the boy in green clothes who appeared yesterday came forward, cleared his throat and said, "The first round of assessment will be completed by a martial artist and an invigilator. Now I will announce an invigilator for everyone present." The first invigilator, Caillou. As soon as the boy in green clothes finished reading, a handsome and upright young man came up from the hazy enchantment behind. As soon as this person appeared, the whole venue suddenly boiled up. Caillou. I didn't expect it to be Vice President Caillou. Vice President Caillou was at the top of the freshman assessment 5 years ago. After entering the academy, he participated in the first major competition and got top 5 results. He became the vice president of the Academy Student Council in just 3 years. Even in Miracle Healer Academy, he is a legend that everyone pursues. I heard that President Caillou has not been an invigilator for several years. I didn't expect him to come this year. Oh, who do you think will become Vice President Caillou's examinee? If it was me, I will be so happy that I would faint. The boy in green clothes looked at Caillou with admiration and envy. Then he looked at the examinees and said in a deep voice, "The examinee that Caillou is supervising is Shiyu." As soon as the boy in green clothes finished speaking, almost everyone turned their eyes on Hushi, with jealousy, envy, disdain, and resentment in their eyes. There were only 100 people here, and the only foundation establishment stage was Hushi. What's more, Hushi's appearance was so outstanding and her identity was very special. Of course, no one of the examinees present did not know him. Someone couldn't help but sighed. How could it be Shiyu? He is just a waste at the foundation establishment stage. He may not even pass the first level. Let Vice President Caillou supervise him is just an insult to him. Hushi didn't care about everyone's comments. She walked forward slowly and handed the inscribed jade slip to Caillou. Caillou didn't find Shiyu in the crowd at the beginning. After all, the pictures recorded in the inscribed jade slip were not clear. He was extremely disgusted with this person in his heart, and he was not interested in taking a second look at her at all. But when Shiyu walked out of the crowd, he realized that this was a teenager with a better appearance than Lu Jishi. The bright phoenix eyes were calm, and the snow-white skin was shining in the sun. When the young man walked up slowly, everything behind him seemed to be a setting. The surrounding plants and wind seemed to stop, making people uncontrollable cast their eyes on him. Caillou opened his eyes slightly and looked at this young man in disbelief. He was actually the cruel, sinister, and shameless bitch in Renshuling's words. If he hadn't known the identity of this young man beforehand, he couldn't help but praise the young man's excellence, not only because of the outstanding and peerless appearance of the young man, but also because of the loftiness radiated from the inside out on him. Miracle Healer Academy's position in Milieu Continent was aloof. No matter how calm the examinees were, they would still feel nervous in their hearts. Just like the eldest lady of Shui Yu sect not far away and Feng Yunqin of the Feng family, each of them looked calm, but their eyes fluctuated slightly and their muscles were tense, which were all signs of tension. Chapter 1073. Written assessment, but the young man in front of him, his squinted phoenix eyes and calm expression, was like having a stroll in his own courtyard. He didn't have a sense of nervousness at all. However, the slight feeling of favor for this young man that had just aroused in Caillou's mind immediately turned into disgust when he thought of the harm he had caused to his president. He said coldly, "Come with me. I will take you to the first assessment room." Hushi raised her eyebrows slightly. There was a slight surprise in her mind. At that moment, she felt a trace of hostility from this person, or even a killing intent with disgust. I have never seen him or met him before, right? Judging from Caillou's expression just now, he obviously doesn't know me either. Then this hostility is a bit interesting. Hushi's mouth twitched slightly, and she followed Caillou. The first assessment was in the academy, but because Hushi and others did not have the pass-inscribed jade slip, the academy opened up several special teleportation arrays to send these candidates to designated places to take the assessment. The way to activate the teleportation array was to use the inscribed jade slip in their hands. The light of the teleportation array flashed, and Hushi quickly entered a huge room. But this room was very strange. The entire room was divided into more than 100 small rooms. Each room was separated by a transparent spiritual power shield. There was only one table and 2 chairs in the small room. Hushi sat down at the table. Soon, she felt Caillou's cold aura behind her as well as the cold eyes staring at her back. But what kind of person was Hushi? Not to mention her profession, which was good at disguising, in her previous life. With her strong mental ability, she was accustomed to being watched in this Milieu continent. Caillou's hostile gaze did not bother her at all. After Hushi sat down, she realized that when she looked up, she could see other candidates appearing in the rooms one after another, and she could faintly hear their voices. When she looked at the table, the surrounding scenes turned blur. So these spiritual power shield is to prevent cheating? They are really advanced. However, to prevent cheating? Does that mean that this time the first level assessment of Miracle Healer Academy is a written test? The things that happened next quickly confirmed Hushi's guess. An old man in his early 50s, wearing a light blue gown and a scholar hat, appeared. His eyes exuded a feeling of spring breeze. As soon as the old man appeared, the noisy examinees in the room all quieted down. Hushi frowned again. It's another nascent soul stage? How many mentors or elders of nascent soul stage are there in Miracle Healer Academy? At this ratio, even if all the nascent soul stage masters of every family and sect in the Milieu continent add up, it is still less than the nascent soul stage master here, right? The old man smiled slightly. His deep voice filled the rooms. I'm the chief invigilator for the first round of the entrance assessment of the Miracle Healer Academy. Now I will announce that the content of the first round assessment is the written assessment. As soon as this statement was made, everyone present couldn't help but widen their eyes. Some were surprised, some panicked, and some were astonished. Hushi heard a young boy not far away said in joy, "The first round is actually a written assessment. The entrance assessment of Miracle Healer Academy has had the written assessment for 2 years. Our luck is really great. Chapter 1074. The Start of Assessment. Idiot. The other young man beside couldn't help but glare at him. He said annoyingly, "Do you think it's easy to pass the written assessment? Do you think you are very fortunate?" "Why, it isn't." The young man was unconvinced. "At least the written assessment is safe. Do you know that the first round of written assessment usually eliminates 10% or even 20% more people than other assessments? When you are eliminated, let's see if you still feel fortunate." As soon as he said this, the young man suddenly fell silent with a face full of sorrow. They looked back and forth. Many people wanted to cheat, but when they looked at the invigilator sitting behind them, they immediately kept away that little thought. If they failed the exam, at least there would be a chance next year. But if the invigilator found that they had bad conduct, then they wouldn't have a chance to step into the Miracle Healer Academy in their lives. Even those who behave excessively would even be rejected by all major sects and families of Miluo continent. The chief invigilator in front seemed to have not heard the murmurs of the people below, and he smiled slightly. The content of the written assessment includes 30% of physician-related questions and 70% of other related questions. The assessment time is 1 hour. The total number of questions is 1,000. Those who can answer more than 500 correctly will be included in the candidate list for the second assessment. The rest will be eliminated. You must not cheat during the answering process. You must not leave the room early. You must not interfere with other people's answers. Offenders. You won't want to know the result. Now, the assessment begins. As soon as the invigilator spoke, he flicked his sleeve. She only felt a blur in front, and there was already a sheet of fluorescent paper in front of her. There was also a pen next to the paper. Of course, it was not a brush, but a hard pen unique to Miluo continent, which was much more convenient to use than a brush. It was just that for many examinees present, they felt extremely strange when they picked up this pen. It was true that these people had long been accustomed to drawing and writing with inscribed jade slip, so they had forgotten what it was like to hold a pen when they were young. Hashi picked up the slender pin, turned a beautiful pin on the tip of her finger, and couldn't help smiling slightly. Originally, she only entered Miracle Healer Academy with a certain purpose, but now it seemed that this academy was much more interesting than she thought. The invigilator quickly announced the start of the written assessment. Hashi activated the special paper on the desk with spiritual power and began to answer the questions. The whole examination room fell into silence. Everyone's attention was focused on the answer sheet. Caillou, who was behind Shiyu, his expression gradually changed from cold disgust to shock. The young man answered the question so fast, he almost wrote the answer after scanning the question. Compared to the examinees in other rooms who were thinking hard for the answer, Shiyu's expression was calm from beginning to end. The tip of the pen slid on the paper, making a rustling sound. After a while, she turned a page over. At this moment, Caillou couldn't sit still. He stood up, walked to Shiyu's side, and looked down. He never believed that Shiyu's speed was really that fast. If she continued at her speed, she could easily finish 1,000 questions within 2 hours. But is this possible? Caillou's first round of entrance assessment was also a written test. With his top results during that year, he only completed more than 700 questions in the end. Chapter 1075. Depends on your luck. Even Lu Jishi, the highest record of Miracle Healer Academy's written assessment, only completed 862 questions in the end. How could this Shiyu complete 1/3 of the questions in just half an hour? But looking at his sloppy appearance, he must have answered blindly. Caillou snorted coldly, watching attentively, but the more he watched, the more frightened he was. Only a moment later, Shiyu had already answered a dozen more questions on the new page. And these questions were almost all correct. It was almost because Caillou himself wasn't certain about a few questions, but he somehow felt extremely reasonable about Shiyu's answers. He even felt like he was enlightened. Seeing Shiyu's swiftly writing pen and his delicate side face, Caillou was shocked. This young man, who is he? Caillou's behaviors naturally attracted the attention of the chief invigilator. He glanced at Caillou with inquiry and was about to walk over. Caillou panicked, shook his head quickly and sat down on his position. The invigilator didn't think too much. The assessment was still going on in an orderly manner. Hushi, who was concentrating on the test paper, couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and peek at Caillou behind her thoughtfully. 2 hours passed quickly, and the test papers of all examinees would be recorded and handed in by the invigilators. After the information was entered into the examination papers, all examination papers would be sealed. It was no longer possible to see which examination paper was answered by which student. The sealed information would not be revealed until all examination papers had been marked. Caillou took Shiyu's examination paper and walked toward the chief invigilator. Another member of the Academy Student Council came out with him. Seeing him shaking his head impatiently, Caillou couldn't help but smile. "Zhang Chong, why do you look so unwilling?" Zhang Chong sighed and said with disgust, "The person I invigilated is really too disgusting. He kept showing off that he is a 4th-level doctor, or someone from the royal family of the Haoyue Kingdom. Pui, with that pig brain? Even from the royal family?" As a result, he couldn't even answer the most basic medical questions. Caillou originally wanted to tease him a few more words when he heard the words, but suddenly his heart moved, and a faint light flashed in his eyes. When the two turned around the corner and were about to enter the room where the chief invigilator was, Caillou suddenly struck Zhang Chong unsteadily. For some reason, Zhang Chong felt his hands numb, and the test paper he was holding fell to the ground. Not only was his hand numb, but he also felt a little dizzy, wondering if he was agitated by the disgusting examinee. Caillou held him, handed him the test paper, and smiled. "Be careful. If you lose the test paper, I will kick you out of the Academy Student Council." Zhang Chong laughed, took the exam paper, and walked into the room without much thought. Caillou gently squeezed the test paper in his hand behind him. His eyes looked gloomy. "Shiyu, even if you are talented, people like you who are bad conduct and vicious are not qualified to stay in Miracle Healer Academy. Whether you can pass this first round of assessment in the end depends on your luck." Thinking of this, he sneered and quickly ran toward the main invigilator's room. The results of the first round of written assessment were still announced on the square where the spiritual root was tested yesterday. At this time, the scorching sun was in the sky, but 98 examinees and their companions were eagerly waiting on the square. None of them leave early. Chapter 1076, Who is Chan Jianqing? Bai Hu and Qing Wan also walked around in front of Hushi, looking up at the Miracle Healer Academy in the enchantment from time to time. Bai Hu said, "Why is it so slow? Isn't it just a written assessment result? It's already half a day. Young Master is more focused on practical skills, but this academy is examining the damn theories. Will Young Master somehow fail? Pui pui pui. Your mouth is really filthy." Qing Wan glared at Bai Hu and said with a cold face, "Who is little? Young Master? How can he fail? I asked Miss just now, and Miss said that those questions are not difficult. It isn't a problem to pass the assessment. If Miss said so, she will definitely pass it." At this moment, a figure flashed in the mist, and the boy in green clothes who had appeared yesterday slowly walked out of the enchantment. Everyone became excited when they saw him. They held their breath and stared at his every move, waiting for him to announce the final result. The boy in green clothes was still cold as always. He waved his hand, and dense words appeared on the bulletin board in the square. For the Miracle Healer Academy entrance assessment, 48 people passed the first round. The above is the list of candidates who will advance to the next round. The content of the second round of assessment will be announced in an hour. Please stay here for a while. After finishing speaking, before everyone reacted, the boy in green clothes disappeared into the square in a blink of an eye. Only at this time, no one would bother about the boy in green clothes as they rushed toward the bulletin board. No me. I actually failed. I thought I did a good job in the assessment. Great. I actually passed the first round of assessment. If I knew that the entrance examination was a written assessment, I would learn from the elders in my family. There was a lot of discussion among the crowd. Some were happy and some were sad. However, after initially paying attention to their own results, some people's eyes looked at the first place in the written assessment. At this moment, someone finally discovered a shocking fact. Oh my God! Look, the person who ranked first in this written test actually got 999 points. You're joking, how? It is really 999 points. How is this possible? Miracle Healer Academy's best record is only over 800 points. Who is so crazy? I can't even finish half of such difficult questions. Someone only got one wrong? Is there an entry error? On the top of the bulletin board, first place 999 points Chan Jianqing were written then. Suddenly, the crowd burst into a commotion. Everyone was looking and shouting, Chen Jianqing? Never heard of it. Who is this? How can he be so powerful? Do you know that the content of the written assessment of the Miracle Healer Academy reflects not only the theoretical level, but also the comprehensive strength of the martial artists? Almost everyone who got good results in the written assessment passed the final assessment and entered the Miracle Healer Academy. Now they are even superior in the academy. I heard that Miracle Healer Academy's highest score holder so far is Lu Jishi, the daughter of the president of the Doctors Association. She is even the president of the Academy Student Council. Her initial entrance examination score was only over 800 points. This Chen Jianqing is even better than Lu Jishi? Unexpectedly, we would be able to participate in the assessment with such a powerful person. But who is this Chen Jianqing? Chapter 1077. Worship and Flattery. Among the crowd, a young man with a greasy face, triangular eyes, and a slightly rounded figure stood in place with a look of astonishment. He stared at the bulletin board in front with his body trembling in excitement. Until the voice of the people looking for Chen Jianqing came into his ears, his manservant suddenly recollected his thought and shouted excitedly, Chen Jianqing, it is our young master. That is our young master. Master, you actually got the first place in the assessment and broke the record of Miracle Healer Academy. You are really amazing. If you pass the assessment this time, Master must be so exhilarated. As soon as the manservant's words came out, everyone's eyes fell on the man. Many people saw that his appearance looked extremely ordinary. No one who participated in the Miracle Healer Academy assessment could be more than 30 years old, but he looked as if he was already in his 30s. Everyone couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Such an insignificant, even somewhat ugly appearance was really not worthy of the appearance of a legend. At least as beautiful as Lu Jishi or as handsome as Caillou. However, most people immediately walked toward Chen Jianqing with flattery faces. Mr. Chen, I'm honored to meet you. It is a great honor to be able to participate in the assessment at the same time as Mr. Chen. Our Wang family runs the medicine hall in the Lin City. If Mr. Chen is looking for cooperation, come to me anytime. Mr. Chen, I didn't expect you to be so excellent. Even your looks are good-looking. You can get such a good result in the assessment. You are truly the first person in Miracle Healer Academy. Does Mr. Chen have any knowledge to share with me so that I can pass the assessment tomorrow? It is said that the second assessment is likely to be conducted in teams. It would be great if I can team up with Mr. Chen. I would appreciate Mr. Chen's advice by then. Mr. Chen, I'm Wang Jie of the Immortal Crane sect. In the subsequent assessments, I'm willing to follow Mr. Chen's orders. The disturbing noise came from all directions, and Chen Jiancheng was dizzy by it. His shiny pink face was flushed. He still seemed to be in the clouds and mist. He couldn't figure out the situation. However, the eyes of those around him looking at him were so admiring and flattering, which greatly satisfied his vanity. Originally, he was still thinking, how could he get 999 points when he didn't answer all the questions? But with everyone's compliments one after another, he instantly put this suspicion behind him. Although Chen Jinqing claimed to be a royal family, in fact, he and the real royal family of Haoyue Kingdom had too far blood connection. None of the royal families of Haoyue Kingdom looked up at him. 10 years ago, Chen Jinqing worked hard in training and studying, and he finally became the fourth-rank doctor. But after becoming a fourth-rank doctor, he came into contact with the upper-class circles in the Doctors' Association and Haoyue Kingdom, and he found that he was really inferior to a dog in the eyes of those who were superior. Moreover, he also realized that instead of working hard to cultivate and to study, it would be better to please the elders in the Doctors' Association and exploit the civilians of Haoyue Kingdom, which would give him a chance to rise. Chen Jianqing, who had been trying to please others, never thought that this day would come. In the past, these people were those he wanted to flatter, but now, Chapter 1078. The score doesn't matter. Looking at the gorgeous clothes and outstanding looks of the men and women around him. These people were either rich or noble. They had extraordinary backgrounds. There were even a few experts of the gold core stage early stage. But now, these people were all around him, flattering him and making him like a star. This feeling is really great. Chen Jinqing coughed and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He pretentiously waved to everyone. Everyone has overpraised. I'm not that good. However, I have some talents and medical skills since young. I initially thought I could get the full score, but I still got one wrong. This is such a shame. As soon as this remark came out, the crowd became even more excited. The people around Chen Jinqing couldn't wait to boast him to the sky. Not far away, in the direction where Hushi and others were, Qing Luan stared at the results on the bulletin board, but she couldn't believe it at all. Why, young master, how could you only get 503 points? That's right, there were only 48 people who passed the first round of assessment, and Hushi was the last one who barely qualified. Qing Luan was Hushi's hardcore fan. Since Hushi said that she thinks the exam is okay, then it must be okay. How could she end up with such a result? Gu Lufeng also didn't believe in the results of this assessment. In his mind, she was omnipotent. She could amaze everyone no matter what she did. Such results were completely inconsistent with Shiyu's style. Only Baihu breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, at least it's a pass. I told you that theory is not the strength of young master. Fortunately, after passing the first level, it will definitely not be a problem to pass the next level. Qing Luan glared at Baihu fiercely. Filthy mouth. It's because of your nonsense. She asked Hushi with a move of her heart, young master, did you do it deliberately to keep a low profile? Before Hushi had time to speak, Wei Qingyuan on the side also leaned over, put his arm on Hushi's shoulder and said with a smile, Shiyu, I also think that compared to the greasy pig's head over there, you seem to be able to pass the exam with such peerless results. Hushi pushed Wei Qingyuan away, glanced at the bulletin board and chuckled. Third place, 692 points. Not bad. The second place in the written examination was Shui Yu sect's eldest miss, Han Qianer, with a score of 708. Wei Qingyuan suddenly stood up straight and said with a smile, that's a must. When little Yuer enters the Miracle Healer Academy, brother can give you tutoring for what you don't understand. Gu Lufeng glanced at Wei Qingyuan with deep eyes. Who is this guy? His identity is mysterious, his strength is extraordinary, and he keeps getting close to Shiyu for some reason. He even calls her Little Yuer. This is really displeasing for some reason. Baihu was even more blunt. Who are you? Come to show off after getting a high score? Do you believe I will beat you? Qing Wan was still annoyed, clutching Hushi's sleeve and whispering, could it be that they made a mistake? Hushi couldn't help but smile and pat Qing Wan's hand. She watched the bulletin board with a flickering gaze, but she said indifferently, it doesn't matter whether the score is high. Just a pass will do. Qing Wan, why do you care so much? The two failed candidates on the side sneered immediately after hearing this. See, some people have a thicker skin than the city wall. Just admit that you get the last place. You even found Yorlsef such a high-sounding reason. Pooey. Chapter 1079. Not interested, yeah. Isn't it just the passing score? If I work a little bit harder, maybe the 48th place will be mine. I don't know if he is lucky or what. He actually dares to talk big. Hey, don't bother about this man. You see so many people have surrounded Chen Jianqing. Let's hurry over and get as many friendships as we can. Yes, no need to even talk to this trash. He will be eliminated in the second round of assessment. The crowd in the entire square surrounded Chen Jianqing, and everyone's face was filled with admiration and flattering smiles. If they could have a connection with such an excellent person, they might get some benefits in the Miracle Healer Academy, so no one was willing to fall behind. But in the square, of course, not everyone would go and flatter this first-place candidate, such as Wei Qingyuan, such as Hashi, and also such as the second-place Shuiyu sect's Miss Han Qianer. However, Chen Jianqing, who was surrounded by the crowd, saw Han Qianer's beautiful silhouette. Then he suddenly pushed away the crowd and walked quickly toward her. The fat and chubby hand stretched out toward Han Qianer. He spoke with excitement and arrogance in his tone. Miss Han, I'm Chen Jianqing. I was lucky to get the first place in the first round of assessment today. Do I have the honor to invite Miss Han to have a cup of tea? He looked up and down Han Qianer's perfect figure, as well as her beautiful and cold face with fiery eyes full of wild ambition. I heard that the assessment tomorrow is likely to be a team performance. I still have some skills in medicine, so I want a high score that Miracle Healer Academy has never had before. If I can team up with the beautiful Miss Han, I believe my skills will surely make Miss Han pass the assessment smoothly. When Chen Jianqing saw Han Qianer on the first day of registration, he was deeply attracted by her cold, glamorous, ascetic temperament. When he was alone, he fantasized himself pressing on top of her body countless times, stripping off her clothes and ravaging her at will. Of course, with his identity, this kind of obscenity could only be fantasized in a dream. With his identity and ability, if he stood in front of Han Qianer, he would have to be beaten by her servants. However, the announcement of the first round of assessment results today gave him unlimited confidence. He was now a legend who broke the record of Miracle Healer Academy. Many people couldn't wait to flatter him and build a rapport with him. Even if it was the Shuiyu sect's eldest miss, she would naturally fall for his talent. Thinking of this, Chen Jianqing's smile became even more confident. Speaking of which, Miss Han's first round of assessment is also good, only more than 200 points lower than mine. Compared with other people, Miss Han is also considered smart. However, if we can discuss together, I believe I can give pointers that can help Miss Han grow even more. Chen Jianqing was really proud of the decent and boastful words he said. He raised his chin arrogantly, waiting for Han Qianer to thank him happily. However, Han Qianer turned her head, glanced at him with a blank and cold expression, and said with a monotone, "Not interested." Chapter 1080. Is he stupid? Just two simple words, as if she didn't even want to talk another word with him. Then she left with her servant. Chen Jianqing looked at Han Qianer leaving. He was taken aback for a moment, then his face was suddenly distorted. The taste of being flattered by everyone made him feel so ecstatic that he almost forgot what it was like to try to please others in the first place. He wanted to curse Han Qianer for not being sensible, but Han Qianer's identity was really noble. He couldn't afford to offend her, so he could only grit his teeth and held it back. Suddenly, Chen Jianqing turned and saw Shiyu and the others. standing leisurely and calmly one by one. He saw that there was no admiration in their eyes, and they didn't try hard to flatter him like others. Chun Jiancheng was immediately infuriated. Never mind if Han Chinner ignored me, Shiyu, a foundation establishment stage, dares to be so arrogant, not putting me in his eyes? Isn't this looking down on me? Hey kid. Chun Jiancheng took a few steps forward, staring at Hushi coldly with triangular eyes. Are you Shiyu who is good at pill refining? Hushi raised her eyebrows and said casually, Yes, so what? Chun Jiancheng raised his chin and said, I heard that the medicinal pills in Shangda Hall are very good. I just lack a few medicinal pills these days. How about you give me hundreds of best quality pills? Of course, I will remember your kindness to me. I will give you indispensable benefits in the future. Hushi sneered, but before she could speak, Gu Lufeng had already taken a step forward and smiled in an official manner. I'm sorry, Shangda Hall has regulations. Regardless of whether they are poor or rich and their strength is high or low, everyone needs to book in advance to buy medicinal pills. We don't allow credit to. If you want to buy medicinal pills, go to the nearest Wanyuan city to make an appointment. Chun Jiancheng's face turned grim after hearing Gu Liufeng's words. However, he didn't look at Gu Lufeng, but he stared at Shiyu coldly with triangular eyes. Although the cultivation of Gu Lufeng, by Hu and others seemed to be higher, he knew at first sight that Shiyu was in charge. Chun Jiancheng said sinisterly, Shiyu, what do you mean? Everyone is the examinee taking part in the same assessment. Don't you even want to give this little face? Do you know that the assessment is not over yet? With your own strength, you will die miserably in the second assessment? Just for these little medicinal pills, you don't even want your life? If you are smart, I don't mind helping you. Hushi slowly smiled, and her voice was louder and clearer, not interested. As soon as she said this, Chun Jiancheng's face suddenly turned into a pig liver color. He was so angry that he trembled, and he looked at Hushi with hateful eyes. Hushi's answer was simple, and it was the same answer as Han Chinner's. Is he shaming me in public? Is this brat really tired of living? The crowd also burst into discussions. Is this Shiyu stupid? Such a good chance to curry favor with the first place. He just let it go like that? Hee, maybe he doesn't even have the authority of Shangda Hall's best quality pills, so he dares not agree to it casually at this moment. If he can't sell it, then just don't sell. Just suffer a little loss. He even offended Mr. Chun. I think he will be very miserable in the second round of assessment. Chapter 1081. Inexplicable irritability. Some people rushed to Chen Jiancheng, handed him a few bottles of medicinal pills and said flatteringly, Mr. Chun, don't be angry. This kid is insensible. Why should you be bothered by him? These are the best medicinal pills sold by my medicine hall. I failed the assessment this time, so they are useless for me. I'll give them all to Mr. Chin, hoping to have a good bond with you. Chun Jiancheng heard the people pleasing around him and ridiculing Hushi, and the anger in his heart disappeared a little. He took the medicinal pills handed over by others and kept them in the storage ring before he smiled coldly at Hushi. Since you are so arrogant, then never mind. But don't you blame me for not reminding you. The second round of Miracle Healer Academy's assessment is not that simple. Although you passed the first round of written assessment by luck, you are just at the mere foundation establishment stage. Hee, just pray for yourself in the following assessment. Hushi smiled faintly, turned around and sat down at random, leaning on the stone bench and closing her eyes to rest. Although by Hu, Gu Lufeng and others hated Chen Jiancheng, Miracle Healer Academy stipulates that all candidates participating in the selection were protected by the Academy. They dared not try to beat up others casually, so as not to cause trouble to Hushi. Wei Qingyuan glanced at Hushi, then at Chun Jiancheng, who looked wretched and smug, and he smiled slowly. The dimples on his face were looming. An hour passed in a flash. Soon, the enchantment flickered and the boy in green clothes slowly walked out. Only this time, the boy in green clothes did not come out alone, but he was followed by an elder. This elder was the one who presided over the spiritual root assessment the day before yesterday, and behind this elder was Caillou, the vice president of the Academy Student Council. Caillou glanced at everyone present, especially Chan Jiancheng with an arrogant look, and he finally looked at Shiyu with some inexplicable complexity. He had seen what happened on the square just now in the Academy enchantment, including Chan Jiancheng's arrogance and Shiyu's silence. Shiyu really doesn't know that his grades were exchanged? Impossible? He was so confident when he answered the questions. But if he knows, why doesn't Shiyu speak up or protest? This Chan Jiancheng, as Zhang Chong said, is really disgusting. But such a person, because of me, is now the top of the written assessment. An inexplicable irritability surged in Caillou's heart. He immediately shook his head to drive out the excess emotions. At this moment, the square was silent, and everyone looked at the elder. He spoke with a low voice slowly. My surname is Qin. You can call me Elder Qin. I believe everyone present knows me. We all met when screening the spiritual root qualifications on the first day. Now, you can stay because I wrote your names onto the lists. When Elder Qin said this, the nervous examinees underneath suddenly relaxed a lot. Their eyes looking at Elder Qin became more cordial. Elder Qin smiled slightly and continued. I believe many people have already guessed the content of the second assessment. We will proceed in groups. 48 people are divided into 8 groups, each with 6 people. The content of the assessment will not be announced now. By tomorrow noon, there will be people bringing you to the assessment venue. Chapter 1082. Curse to everyone and himself. After hearing Elder Qin's words, the candidates below became more confident as they looked at each other. The content of the Miracle Healer Academy's assessment would change every year, but one thing wouldn't change was that there would inevitably be a round of assessments that needed to be conducted in groups. Therefore, before these candidates came to participate in the assessment, many of them had already made good connections with several families and sects to form a team so as to increase their chance of passing the assessment. But then, Elder Qin's words broke their beautiful illusions. However, the difference between this year and previous years is that the grouping will be determined through a draw lot. What? No way. As soon as this remark came out, the square suddenly burst into commotion. Those who had already decided to form a team, especially those candidates who were planning to pass the assessment, were disheartened. Grouping through draw lot meant there was a high chance of people burdening the group. Of course, there were also people who were delighted. Those who were not strong and did not have the support of the family or sect behind them originally thought that they could only work alone in the second round of assessment, but the decision of drawing lots was equivalent to giving them a high chance of relying on the better candidates. The chance for them to pass the assessment was naturally greater. How could they not be happy? However, after the chatters, everyone's eyes couldn't help but fall on Shiyu. Everyone's eyes were full of disgust and contempt. They couldn't wait to kick this guy who was only at the foundation establishment stage from the list of passing the assessment. Then someone said, whoever groups with Shiyu really has extremely bad luck. After that, there was a burst of lively discussion in the crowd. How? My family has talked to Zhu Zhengwei before to let him assist me this time. He has the Thunder spiritual root and is at the Gold Core stage, which is a strong combat power. With him, I have higher chance of being selected. Now, I'm definitely hopeless. Yeah. In order for me to team up with the strong, my family also paid a lot of magic weapons and medicinal pills. Now those are all in vain. But no matter who you get, it isn't so hopeless as getting Shiyu in your team, right? With him, I guess the Gold Core stage will be dragged to death. This kind of person is really shameless. He obviously doesn't have enough strength, but he still wanted to participate in the assessment. He can't pass it, but he still wants to drag down the others. Doesn't he feel embarrassed? He just scored 503 points on the written assessment. Why can't he get wrong for a few more points? Just let him be eliminated in the first round. Now, he is just a curse to everyone and himself. H. Keep your voice down. Be careful that he hears it. So what if he hears it? Could he still beat me? He dares? From the beginning of complaining about the draw lot rules to almost everyone expressed their disgust on Hushi. If she had a bad psychological quality, she would have quit, but she just stood there listening to the boy in green clothes introducing the cautions and taboos when participating in the group assessment. The boy in green clothes and Elder Chin were more calm, as if they hadn't heard the comments from the people below at all. They just announced the various rules. During the assessment, all the invigilators will watch your every move through the 9-turn recording stone. In the end, your assessment results in the second level will be comprehensively considered based on both team and individual performance. Chapter 1083. Who are they? Personal items are not allowed, including medicinal pills, magic weapons, spiritual pets, and storage devices. Before the assessment, the college will uniformly distribute basic materials to ensure the fairness of the assessment. These regulations were similar to those of the assessments in previous years. Many candidates did not listen carefully, but they stared at Hushi hatefully. The words from their mouth was getting more and more harsh. Wei Chengyuan's original attitude was that it had nothing to do with him, but he was a little furious. Bai Hu and the others were fortunate that at the beginning of the draw lot, the non-related crowds were all driven out of the square. Otherwise, they would really give them a painful lesson after hearing those remarks. Wei Chengyuan glanced coldly at the people who pointed at Hushi, and the pressure of Gold Core's stage on him was released. Soon, those with insufficient cultivation were suppressed and dare not speak. Their eyes watching Hushi were still full of contempt. Wei Chengyuan leaned close to Hushi and said, "Shiyu, they said those words to you. You really don't care?" Hushi smiled nonchalantly, and she slowly said, "Why should I care for these nobodies?" Wei Chengyuan was taken aback for a moment, then he couldn't help laughing out loud. He really found this young man more and more interesting. After the boy in green clothes finished the announcement, the draw lot soon began. Hushi got the 6th group, while Wei Chengyuan was in the 1st group. Wei Chengyuan regretfully said, "If only I could be with you. With me protecting you. Let's see if those guys dare to say more." Hushi smiled indifferently, but she still said, "Thank you." Although Wei Chengyuan's identity was a mystery and his purpose was a mystery, Hushi couldn't feel any malice from him. Hushi still knew how to appreciate other people's kindness. Holding the inscribed jade slip with her grouping information, Hushi walked slowly to the 6th group. In order to make the next day's assessment faster, after the draw, the members of each team must get to know each other. When Hushi walked over, some people said delightedly, "Great, this burden is not in our group. I'm really afraid that the results of our entire group will be affected by him." Until Hushi walked until the 6th group, the other members of the other groups were relieved. They were looking at the members of the 6th group with eyes full of sympathy and gloat. Especially when they saw Chen Jianqing, who was the first in the written assessment, and Han Qianer, who was the second in the 6th group. Many people were even more delighted. In this way, the final results of Chen Jianqing and Han Qianer would be lowered, and the chance of other groups getting better results would be greatly increased. Contrary to the other groups of candidates, when the members of the 6th group saw Hushi standing in their team, their faces suddenly turned grim. A pretty-looking woman even took a step forward and said gloomily, "Are you sure you really got the 6th group? It's not because we have Mr. Chen and Miss Han, so you deliberately want to take advantage of it?" This woman seemed to be about 26 years old, and her name was Chun Xiaoying. Among all the members of the 6th group, except for Hushi, who had the lowest cultivation base, she was only at the intermediate stage of the condensation period. In addition to Han Qianer of the Gold Core stage and Chen Jianqing of the condensation period later stage, there were also Wang Hai and Yang Hailong of the condensation period later stage. Although the written assessment scores of Wang Hai and Yang Hailong were not as high as those of Chen Jianqing and Han Qianer, they were still in the middle upper rank. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.